Xin Zhao, and welcome back to North Vietnam for more Strike Fighters 2. A bizarre thing happened after the end of the last mission, and that was the date got pushed forward all the way into August of 1966. And I don't know why this happened exactly, but I suspect that I was messing around in the files doing testing and then forgot that I had set a really, really long time in between missions. So we ended up going forward several months, way further than I wanted it to go. So what that means is that we've ended up losing the May MiG-17 mission, which was going to be the final MiG-17 mission that I was planning on doing, before we transitioned over to MiG-21s here in April, which to me is not really a big deal. We've spent plenty of time with the MiG-17, and we'll be returning to it again in the future for one more variant. And realistically, Win Van Koch returned to China for an entire month of transition training to get into the MiG-21. So basically that's what we've had happen here, is that after a month of transition training, I've now returned for a new campaign in the MiG-21. Now, lots of people are huge MiG-21 fans. The plane has a worldwide following for a variety of reasons, but what I'm really excited about is to present this version, the original version of the aircraft, which, if you're only familiar with the more modern iterations, is so far different from anything that you know. I think it's going to be a real pleasure to be able to reintroduce this plane to people in its original format. What we have is a super short-range, clear-weather day fighter with a minimal amount of armament, only 2 missiles, only 30 rounds in the gun, and no radar. This thing is bare bones, as the MiG gods originally intended it to be. This thing is lightweight, simple in its construction, reliable, and it gets the job done, as we're going to find out, but definitely lacking in some of the amenities that many people would be used to. What we have here specifically is the MiG-21 F-13 Fishbed C. This is the first mass-produced version of the aircraft. The Fishbed A were the prototypes, there was only 5 of them I think, and Fishbed B had a run of only 30 aircraft, and they were armed with 3 guns and had no missile capability. After 2 years of production, the plane was modified to be able to carry air-to-air missiles, and this version that we see here, the F-13, was introduced in 1960. With the completion of his transition training up in China, Win Van Koch has been reassigned back to the 921st Saozo Fighter Regiment, which, of course, was our first squadron that we were in with the MiG-17s. However, now we're in the 2nd Flight Section B. The date is April 1st, 1966, and it was in April of 66 that a detachment of MiG-21s from Fukien was reassigned to Kep Air Base. So that's us. We are back at Kep, which is the airbase that we've been at now for the last few missions, but we are back in our original squadron in new aircraft. Today's mission objective is to intercept an enemy flight approaching the Ha Dong barracks, destroy the enemy flight before it reaches its target. Call sign today, we are the Hoi Chao flight. We're flying 4 MiG-21 F-13 Fishbed Cs. Takeoff time of 12:20. Down intercepting the target, 12:37. Back landing at Kep by 12:49. To the loadout. Hoi Chao Flight 1. I'm in aircraft 2040, painted in VPAF Silver 1 of the Vietnamese People's Air Force. You can see that the empty weight is only 11,000 pounds, which is extremely light. That's what contributed to this plane's ability to go Mach 2 and to have a ceiling of around 60,000 feet. If we add full fuel, that gives us another 4,600 pounds, or the equivalent of around 680 gallons of fuel on the internals alone. Not very much at all, and 100% ammo is only 60 pounds because we've only got 30 rounds in that gun. It's basically 1 or 2 bursts, and we're going to be out of ammo. Down on the wings, though, we do have the 2 pylons, 2 support, 2 R3S ATOL missiles, the AA-2s, also called the K-13. And then along our centerline tank, maybe the most important piece of equipment, which is our 490-liter drop tank, which is going to give us a few extra precious minutes of flight time, and adds another 970 pounds for a total takeoff weight today of 17,220 pounds. And there's very little else that the MiG-21 can be equipped with, so this is basically going to be our loadout for every mission, all 4 aircraft. The plane does have the ability to carry some air-to-ground stores, but as North Vietnamese pilots will basically never ever ever use that. So this will be our loadout for the duration. 2 missiles, 1 drop tank. To the map. Here we are, the second flight, 921st, Saozo, over at Kep. Again, this is the detachment of MiG-21s that were sent over to this airbase. The rest of the 21s were all based at Fukien at this time. And we are at 20, a strength of 20, with a supply of 51%. And of course our old squadron, our most recent old squadron, is also still active at Kep. So here's the third flight of the 923rd Yente, still in operation. As well as the first flight, and of course that's where we just came from a month ago. Still flying their J5s. Over at Fukien, though, here's the first flight of the 921st with their MiG-21Fs. Third flight is flying J5 Frescos. Second flight has 20 more MiG-21Fs. Fourth flight still rocking their true blue Soviet MiG-17Fs. And of course we have our scattered AN-2 Colts, these particular ones based out of Guylam. So our mission today is intercepting Americans, I think coming in off the ocean, so we'll be taking off from Kep, circling around to the north towards the Chinese border, not too far, but just far enough so that we are in the safe zone north of Hanoi, to get the squadron up to altitude and together into formation, and then we'll continue the circle back down to the south, heading down towards waypoint 3 just at the top of Thud Ridge, the Tamdao mountain range. Once we hit the Tamdao Mountains, and the Americans are coming inland at that point, maybe then we dive down low to avoid radars and missiles. We're going to continue south down to waypoint 4, which is going to be just over the Red River, just to the west of Hanoi. After we hit our initial point, then it's southeast down to waypoint 5, where we will intercept the Americans. We have very limited ammo and fuel, so once we're low on one or both of those, we disengage, and we're heading back to the north to land at Kep. Over to the roster, and since it's the first mission of a new campaign, we'll once again take a look at the pilot record for Win Van Koch, and here he is. Rank of Lieutenant, score is 15,050, a rating of 62%. Total kills, a completely unrealistic 38 so far. We've downed 38 aircraft over the course of, whatever this is, 13 months, or 12 months, something like that. However, the good news is our kill ratio is 38-0 because we have not been shot down yet. We've been lucky enough to... there's been a couple of close calls. I mean, the very first mission we had that emergency landing with the landing gear blown off. So been close, but no actual... We haven't had to eject from anything yet, so that's good. Total flight hours, 6 hours, 45 minutes, 39 seconds. Last type flown, J5 Fresco, and we have a 73% mission success rate. Flying on my wing today in Hoi Chau 2 is Second Lieutenant Tran Nyok Chow. He's got 4 air-to-air kills already, with 8 combat missions under him, so he's a prospective ace. We'll keep an eye out to maybe help along. Flying in number 3, commanding the second element, is going to be Second Lieutenant Win Hoi Kiem, and his wingman in the number 4 spot, Second Lieutenant Dang Nyok Chu. And that wraps up our first briefing with the MiG-21. Kind of a lot of information to get through, and there'll be more to come once we get airborne as usual. So we'll see you out there, and let's get going. Hoi Chu flight, runway 12, ready for departure from Kep Air Base. Now, before we get going, let's just take a quick minute or two for some cockpit familiarization, because, like I said before, a lot of you who are intimately familiar with the modern MiG-21s are probably looking at this panel and going, what the hell am I looking at? This instrument panel is legit. This is about 98% correct for a 1960s F-13 model MiG-21. In fact, what I used to research this was one of the many documents associated with the Operation Have Doughnut program from the late 60s. That's where the U.S. got their hands on an Iraqi MiG-21 that had defected to Israel, and they actually brought it over here to Area 51 out in the desert and flew it for 52 days, doing every manner of tests they could. In fact, there'll be a link to that down in the description if you're interested. And, you know, the Operation Have Doughnut, it was a brings me to another sidebar real quick. If you're ever really interested in something that I talk about here in one of these episodes, make sure you take a look at the description, because very often, if I'm using any references outside of Wikipedia, I try to include them down in the description, so if you want any further reading on something, there's very often things down there. So don't forget to look at the description if you're interested in more info, because I try to disseminate as much info as I can. So anyways, back here to our F-13 instrument panel. Beginning in our extreme lower left is the gear flaps and speed brake indicator. Right above that is the gear lever itself, and just to the left of that is the oxygen supply gauge. Just above the gear handle is a unique gauge to the MiG-21, and that is the cone control indicator. The pointy nose cone out front in the intake of the MiG-21 actually moves as the airplane increases speed. The cone is variable so that it's always supplying an adequate amount of air into the intake of the engine so we don't get compressor stall. On newer model MiGs, the cone's position is directly related to the aircraft's speed, but here on these early models, the first 2 or 3 MiG models, the cone only had 3 positions. The first position is fully retracted aft, and that's where the cone sits for all subsonic speeds and up to Mach 1.5. The second middle position is for between Mach 1.5 and 1.9, and for speeds higher than Mach 1.9, the cone is in the third position or fully forward. Moving up and around the outside of the control panel, we have the accelerometer, which measures the g-forces on the aircraft. The fuzzy stuff that's sort of around it, in real life, there's a whole myriad of small switches that really don't pertain to the game at all, but if you're interested, it includes things like the tank jettison, the landing light switch, parachute release, the de-icer, the weapons jettison, that's the little half-rounded red switch to the right of the accelerometer that's blurry. The red round handle off to the left is the emergency brakes, and the parking brake is the gray handle to the right of it. Here on the panel itself is our standard cluster of various gauges. In the upper left is our airspeed, measured in kilometers per hour. Underneath that is our HSI, horizontal situation indicator, or compass. Down in the bottom left is our radar altimeter, so that's true altitude above the ground. In the top center is our artificial horizon. This is the improved new generation of attitude indicators where they switch the colors. Blue actually represents sky now, and not the ground like it did before. And it's got the little weather vane in the middle, which is going to show us bank angle when we go into a turn. Underneath the attitude is our pressure altimeter, and this guy has 2 rings to it. The inner ring shows thousands of meters, the outer ring shows hundreds of meters within that 1,000. Down at the bottom of the stack is our clock. And this marker panel right here in the middle, this is a series of 4 lights. The top light is simply marker, and that is always illuminated, telling us that there's power to the system. The second light down comes on when the cone is fully extended, so that would be full forward up at Mach 2. The third one down indicates that the stabilizer is in landing mode, so once we're airborne with the gear and flaps up, that'll go out. And the bottom one is trim effect neutral. We don't use trim in this game, so it is always in neutral, so that light will always be on. So basically only lights 2 and 3 will see any difference there. Over to the right side of the panel now, in the upper left, we have our VSI, vertical speed indicator. Below that is our turn coordinator. Oil pressure is beneath that, and then down at the very bottom, we have our cabin pressure. Over on the right side, we have our engine gauge cluster. Up at the top of the next column, we have our Mach meter. Beneath that is the tachometer for the engine, and underneath that is engine temperature. Next column to the right, we only have 2 gauges. We start with the fuel gauge. This is a combined fuel gauge for all the fuel on board the aircraft, including drop tanks. Now this is new because in the MiG-17 and previous, we had the idiot lights that would only come on when tanks were empty, and then we only were actually gauging the final 1,000 liters of fuel in the plane. Well, this is a total fuel gauge, so right now with the tank on board, you can see that we're right in the neighborhood of 2,500 liters on board. And then down underneath that we have some hydraulic pressures. Off to the very, very far right, tucked away in the corner, is our electrical gauges. That's the voltmeter up the top, and then the bottom one is amps per hour. Now, up above the fuel gauge, you see we have a marker panel with 6 lights on it. In real life, the order of the lights is slightly different than it's represented here, but they basically tell us the same things. The upper left light should illuminate when the afterburner is engaged, but that doesn't happen here in the game. The middle left is the fire light, and the bottom left is the generator off light. So those two will illuminate if we get hit and the engine's burning out back. We'll see the fire light generator off. The upper right also is inoperative, but that would be the engine start light. The middle right light is our drop tank empty light, so when either the tank goes dry or we jettison it, a green light will come up in that middle position telling us that that we're on internal fuel. And the bottom right light is our 500-liter fuel emergency light, which corresponds to the little red arc on the fuel gauge itself, telling us that we're on the final 500-liter reserve of fuel, and we have to get back to base immediately. So, and that's a red indicator light. We'll see that come up probably a lot because this thing is a gas guzzler. And that basically does it for all the important stuff that actually works here in the game. We do have this bottom center control panel, which on the real plane includes switches for the gun camera, the clock, the pitot heat, and some other just sort of random systems crap for like navigation and stuff. So as you can see, basically non-operational here, but it's systems also that we don't worry about in this particular game, so no big loss. And then up at the top, that upper right panel is our missile control panel, which includes switches for single or salvo fire, which I've found interesting. Apparently, you could set the ATOLs to fire in a salvo automatically with that left switch, and then the right switch, that's how you selected left or right missiles if you were in single fire. And those two lights down underneath the switches are our left and right missile indicating lights. So those should be illuminated right now because we do have missiles attached. And I believe how they work is once you fire the missile, once the rack is empty, then that light will go out. So there we have it, in-depth look at the MiG-21 F-13 instrument panel. Again, that can be found under Figure 71 within the Have Doughnut documentation down below. I think we're finally ready to get going, so let's disengage the brakes, push the R11 engine up into full afterburner for our first MiG-21 takeoff run. And the afterburner lights off with no problem. We're full power heading down the runway now. Nose wheel is lifting off on its own as we're approaching 300 kilometers per hour, which is rotation speed. Pull back just a little bit more, and we're airborne, lifting smoothly off the ground. Gear and flaps coming in as we level out just above the runway, letting the speed wind up. We're up to 600 kilometers per hour now as we're out over the threshold of runway 12. Slight climb. Move back off the throttle, coming off the afterburner, and we'll begin our turn to the left as we circle up and around towards the Chinese border. Rotation speed in MiG-21 is 300 kilometers per hour, as well as the stall speed. Gear and flaps can both be deployed at 450, and our approach speed is going to be somewhere between 350 and 400. So we are a delta-winged aircraft, so it's going to be a pretty high approach and landing speed. Although the stall speed is around 300, it's a pretty soft stall, and if we're taking off or landing, we got to keep pitch less than 10 degrees, or we're going to get tail strike. So in order to keep that nose down, we'll be traveling much faster than we've been used to, especially in the MiG-17, which has such a low approach and landing speed. Okay, 3 is airborne. Let's turn on the HUD for just a second here and take a look at our rudimentary radar system. You can see up in the corner there, it says switch to bore sight for ranging mode. So we don't have a search radar in this aircraft. All we have is the range finding radar tied into our gun sight. So got to make sure that we're switched over to bore sight, otherwise the gun sight's not going to be computing properly because it's not going to be getting the right information in. So since I usually run with the in-game HUD off, we're not going to see that little reminder up in the upright. So it's just going to be an extra step to remember once we're airborne to make sure that the range finding radar is on. There we go, and 4 is airborne as we're rolling out on our course. I'm really happy that the navigation equipment is much better in this airplane than it was in the MiG-17. The HSI is actually showing us that needle is telling us the direct course to the waypoint and not the course from the previous waypoint as it was in the MiG-17. Okay, ground control telling us we have primary targets, 8 o'clock at 50 miles. They're on the radar already. So they're out over the Gulf of Tonkin on their way in. The MiG-21 Fishbed is a Mach 2 interceptor and fighter designed by the Mikoyan Gurevich Design Bureau in the Soviet Union. The plane made its first flight in 1956, and after several early design variations, finally entered service in 1959 as the MiG-21F, codenamed in the West as the Fishbed B. The F denoted the afterburner of the R-11F turbojet engine. The first MiG-21 was a short-range day fighter, originally armed with two 23mm cannons and a 30mm. In the second year of production, the armament was switched to two 30mm. The MiG-21F could carry two bombs on wing hardpoints, and was equipped with a rangefinder radar and a computing gun sight. The R-11 turbojet was created by the Tumansky Design Bureau in 1956 for the Yak-25 aircraft. The R-11 was such a successful design that variations were used in the Yak-25, 26, 27, 28, Sukhoi Su-15s, and MiG-21 aircraft. The R-11F-300, also sometimes known as the R-37F, was the afterburning variant that went into the MiG-21F. It put out 8,640 pounds of thrust, the afterburner adding another 4,000 pounds for a total output of 12,650. The MiG-21's max speed was Mach 2.05 at altitude. With the Fishbed's light weight, it had an excellent thrust-to-weight ratio and could sustain zoom climbs easily. In 1960, a further modified R-11 was installed in a MiG-21F that set the Soviets' first world speed record in September of that year. The following year, another MiG-21 set a new altitude record of almost 114,000 feet, breaking the record previously held by an F-104. This performance came at a price, and like other Soviet aircraft of the time, the MiG-21 had a very limited range. The plane's combat radius was 370 miles with external tanks, equivalent to around only 45 minutes of flight time. This was shortened considerably by combat maneuvering. During the Taiwan Strait Crisis of 1958, Taiwanese F-86s fired AIM-9 Sidewinders at Chinese MiGs, and several of these missiles were captured by the Communist Chinese. One missile was sent to the Soviet Union, where it was reverse-engineered to become the K-13, what NATO called the AA-2 ATOL. It was found later that ATOLs were such an exact copy that parts could be interchanged between Sidewinders and both missiles still worked correctly. A new MiG-21 variant was designed to carry the new missiles, entering service in 1960 as the MiG-21 F-13, the aircraft we're flying today. The F denoted the afterburning engine, and the 13 denoted the K-13 missile system. The gun sight and range-finding radar were both improved, though the gun armament was reduced. F-13s had only a single 30mm with only 30 rounds on board. Later, that capacity would be increased to 60. The MiG-21 F-13 had many advantages. Its small size and simple design made it cheap to make, costing only a quarter of an F-4 Phantom. It was fairly reliable, and maintenance was easy. A Fishbed could be back in the air after only a 20 or 30-minute turnaround on the ground. It was simple and easy to fly, with excellent capability in all flight regimes. The engine produced very little smoke, making it harder to spot. It had a very small radar cross-section when coming head-on, making it hard to spot on radar as well. It could pull up to 8 Gs, and could pull more instantaneous Gs to outturn most American aircraft. Even as a delta-winged aircraft, normally notorious for lack of low-speed capability, the 21 was still maneuverable down to an incredible 115 knots. However, the plane also had serious drawbacks that the U.S. pilots were later taught to exploit. Engine response was terrible, making formation flying very difficult. The R-11 took 14 seconds to spool from idle to full military power, with even more time before the afterburner lit. Though the plane could pull hard Gs in a turn, the speed bleed-off was excessive. Tight turns could not be maintained as the aircraft lost its energy. Cockpit visibility was terrible. Forward visibility was particularly bad, as it was through 3 panes of glass, the heads-up display, a slab of bulletproof glass, and the canopy itself. Targets could generally only be spotted at 3 to 5 miles range. Canopy framing was often in the way. The gun sight jittered crazily when firing the guns, and it couldn't track targets over 3 Gs. Rear visibility was hampered by the narrow canopy, the seat, and more canopy framing. Rear-view periscope mirrors were not introduced until later models, so the MiG-21 F-13 had a huge 50-degree blind spot cone to its rear. Most damning, though, was the MiG's speed restrictions below 15,000 feet. Above 510 knots, there was so much force on the control surfaces, the pilot was physically unable to pitch the nose beyond a few degrees at a time. At 595 knots, or .98 Mach, the plane buffeted so badly it was essentially unflyable. A MiG-21 had to be above 15,000 feet, or 4,600 meters, to fully take advantage of its speed and maneuverability, a lesson U.S. aircrews began to learn. By keeping engagements fast and under 15,000 feet, an F-4 would take advantage of the MiG's speed restrictions and high speed bleed-off to maneuver into its blind spot for kills. Despite these drawbacks, in the right hands the MiG-21 was still a fearsome foe, and 13 of North Vietnam's aces scored their kills in it. The F-13 was the first MiG-21 model to be built in large numbers, and is considered the first generation of the fighter. Over 500 aircraft were built in the Soviet Union, with another 200 built under license in Czechoslovakia. The F-13 was also licensed to China as the Chengdu J-7. The MiG-21 F-13 was eventually replaced by introduction of the second-generation models, beginning in 1961 with the MiG-21 PF. Okay, Hoi Chau flight in formation, 4,600 meters above the city of Viet Tri, heading towards our waypoint 4. Hanoi just out off to our left. So the real-life MiG-21 tactics in North Vietnam were for the CGI to direct the MiGs in behind the American flights, and then they would make supersonic attack runs, firing all their missiles, hoping that one would hit, and then speeding away to safety. Early in the war, because they had such a limited number of MiG-21s, they did not want to put any of them in any more danger than was necessary. So I'd like to try to do something similar to that, although I'll stick around and, stay with the combat for a little bit longer, even though we do have very limited ammo. So I'm going to turn out towards the east now, and I want to try to see if we can get behind the strike flight, if we can locate our primary target, and then circle around behind them to make a high-speed run at their rear end. See if that's possible without getting jumped by the enemy escorts. Bad guys, 1 o'clock, 25 miles. Here's F4s. They're sort of down low. They're just coming in over, probably Nam Dinh, which is just out to our right there. And the primary targets are down at Angels 5, so that's only 5,000 feet. So we're nice and high now. If we can get behind them, we can swoop down and make a diving attack behind them. Okay, primary target's dead ahead now, 25 miles out. Right, 2 o'clock, 15 miles. Okay, so we have an F4, an escort F4, down and to my right. And it looks like he's passing us by, so if that's the case, I'm going to queue up some full afterburner here. Full afterburner. Let's use our high speed to get around behind these guys. They're still 20 miles out. I want to make a high speed dash to get away from these escorts. And there's another enemy escort. I think it's another F4 just out to the left, underneath Second Lieutenant Tran, and it is an F4B. And it looks like he does not see us either. Let's send the second flight after him. 3, attack my target. Let's use the second flight to keep the escorts off our back. And me and Tran, we will be the primary shooting force against the primary targets, who are only 10 miles away now, so they should be coming into visual range. Haifong out to my left, Namdin out to the right. Primary targets should be down low, down to my right. 1 o'clock, only 6 miles now, down at 5,000 feet. Where are they? There they are, I see them. Looks like we have 8 strike aircraft down low and to the right, so I'm circling around. And they're A4s, they're right underneath me. 2, attack my target. Let's get these guys engaged. And let's get 3 and 4 back here to engage as well. ATOLs selected. We've got the growl in our ear. There's a MiG-21 on the formation already, making an attack. Down underneath, so we have a nice, clear, cool sky, so we can maybe get a missile lock on one of these guys. Radar warning indicator going off. We have a lock with a missile. ATOL away. Both of them went stupid. Son of a bitch. Switching to guns. Okay, red light means we're locked up with the ranging radar, but it's a miss, and I'm pulling up and away before we get attacked from behind. 2's out of ammo already, man. What an inglorious start to our first attack run with the new... with the shiny new MiG-21s. 2 missile failures right out of the gate. And then we missed with my first burst, but I'm going to come swing back around, and we're going to make another attack run on these guys. Follow the flak to know where they are. The sky is full of A4s. And I'm pretty sure the external tanks are empty. Now's a good time to dump them, since I forgot to do it before. Okay, new Skyhawk targeted, and let's tell Flight 2 to engage air. That'll free them up to just do whatever they want, and we'll also make sure that, hopefully, gets number 4 in on the action. There's a MiG-21 out to the left, firing on A4s. Firing some guns, I just saw them going off. I'm not sure what they're doing. It looks like the front flight is... There we go! 3 is out of ammo as he splashes an A4. Pieces coming off. I think maybe they're turning in on their primary target. We're lining up on this guy. He is straight and level. That's a hit. There we go. Much, much better. Friendly ATOL incoming from behind. Let's make sure we're up and away so it doesn't lock on us. And there's the streak. Looks like it's a miss, though. Okay, up over the top. Let's roll back in on these guys. 2's out of missiles. There's another flaming A4 off to my left. Rolling in on the lead flight. They're holding formation, maintaining that ECM coverage as they're streaking in on their way to the primary target. But without maneuvering, that's going to cost them. We're going to slide in right behind this guy. He is straight and level. Radar lock. Fucking, we're out of ammo. That's it. That is it. That was the last rounds we had. 2's still with us, but he's out of ammo, so let's get him back on. I think I saw that 3 was out of ammo. There's somebody falling out of the sky just out to the right. So somebody got an A4. Impacting out in the fields. We're just to the southeast of Hanoi, I think. Primary target's 12 o'clock, so the primary targets are still on their way, and oh, there they are. We've done some damage to them, but we haven't done more than 50%. Is there anybody left who still has ammo? Somebody picking up flak up and to the left. Is that an escort? Looks like another A4. But he seems to be separate from the primary targets right there, just above us. Something else going by. That's an AN-2. That's a friendly Antonov. Just moseying over the battlefield. And I think that's an Iron Hand A4. I think he's attacking defenses right over the base, which is about to get bombed from the remaining Skyhawks. Let's steer clear and make sure we don't get a bomb dropped on us. Ooh, and then there it is. It's major hits on the base. We are unable to stop the majority of the strike. Skimming the trees as we're just trying to disengage and make sure we're nice and far away from any roving American escorts. But I want to see, I think 3 and 4 might still have the ability to attack. We got A6s nearby as well. Okay, 4's on those. Right over downtown Hanoi right now, crossing the Red River. Let's go inspect the damage. We'll let 4 expend the last of his missiles or gun ammo, and then we'll get everyone together and we'll hoof it back for Kep. Ooh, yeah, I see a bunch of buildings down in the center of the compound there. A couple of barracks destroyed as well. Somebody's under attack. Shit. Escort F4 finally found one of my guys. Let's see if we can go assist. Even if we can scare him off, that would be helpful. I can't see where the hell he is, though. There he is. Oh, look at that. Whole flight of something. I can't tell if they're friend or foe. Radar warning receiver is going off. Somebody's pinging us with radar. Another escort F4 somewhere. I saw that 4 was firing guns at somebody. And he got a hit! And he's out of ammo. His last rounds, he shot down something. Somewhere. A lot of confusion up here. I'm really not sure. I'm seeing MiGs going by, and I guess we're near maybe that A6 squadron. Let's get everybody in. I've got a missile inbound. Solid tone on the RWR. Banking hard to just avoid it. I have no idea where it's coming from. Jesus Christ! Oh my god. Pulling hard back on the fucking stick. Sliding and skidding over the rooftops of Hanoi. But we made it. We pulled it out just barely. Oh no, and a wingman is hit somewhere. We've got someone down. They're supposed to be rejoining. I don't know where anybody is. We're right here. Who is this? I think, oh, this is Guy Lam. We're right near Guy Lam Air Base. Let's roll over that and give us some additional ground support. There should be 2 or 3 SAM sites in the area as well, but I haven't seen any firing. Oh no, number 2 got shot down. Second Lieutenant Tran. Only 3 and 4 responded. Well, we're all right here. 3 is directly behind me on the south side of Guy Lam, and 4 is on the eastern outskirts of Hanoi. I feel like we should have a lot more ground fire and SAM support right now. Missile inbound on one of the wingmen again, being hounded by those escorts. Kep is directly ahead of us. We're only a couple miles away. Here we go, this is 3. Oh no, and he's been hit by an F8 Crusader taking gunfire. Oh, and he crashes into a small village on the outskirts of Hanoi. Son of a bitch. I hope he punched out. Here's number 3, engaged with F4s. He's still got both missiles on board. He's got full missile complement. Dodging sidewinders from enemy F4s. Alright, we are north of Kep. Down low, just trying to get away from these guys. Can we get any help? No, negative. All assets are committed. Somebody is still tracking me. Son of a fucking bitch. Okay, we lost him in the ground return, but I have no idea where this guy is. So we're north of Kep, we're north of Back Yang. This should be a safe zone, but we can't seem to get these guys to disengage. 4, return home. I can't wait for these guys to figure out where I am anymore. I need to get this thing on the deck. So, here's Kep right here. We're just going to intercept the runway, and we're going to make a high-speed overpass, circle to landing, because there's enemies everywhere. And we've got a low fuel light on, so we're less than 500 liters left, so we really got to get this thing down. And into the brake. There's 600 kph. There's 5. Nope, still a little fast. 450-ish. There we go. Gear flaps coming out as we are on downwind. Keep the air brakes up and keep the engine throttled up to make sure that we have good response times. Notice how these early models are physically different from later MiGs. The pitot tube probe is on the bottom of the intake, and the dorsal fairing is actually still thin. It's not jam-packed full of electronics and fuel like in later versions. It's a very narrow, sleek design, these early MiGs. Okay, turning to final, as somebody is engaged still. Or I am. I mean, it's possible that I have someone behind me, but probably not, since ground defenses aren't going crazy at the airbase. Okay, runway is in sight, coming in for a hot landing. Again, managing that speed, because this thing will sink like a stone if we get too slow, but we gotta manage that pitch so that we don't get a tail strike. Settling in. Oh! Oh, jeez. We bounced it for a rough landing. Lucky we didn't blow out a tire on that one. So, holding the nose up, aerodynamic braking down towards the end of the runway. We don't have the drag chute available to us that the real aircraft has, so we'll just let it slow down. We're 2,000 feet from the end of the runway. Nose wheel down, brakes in, flaps up. And here's hoping that number 3 is still safe somewhere as we make our way off the runway for our first MiG-21 mission. That was sort of a mixed bag, I would say. There we go, clear of the runway. Okay, we'll hold it up here. Pop the forward hinged canopy open, the early one-piece canopy. We'll see you over in the debriefing as we take apart this mission bit by bit. Okay, we were to intercept the enemy flight approaching the Addon barracks, destroy the enemy flight before it reaches its target. Flight time was 30 minutes, 42 seconds. 3 primary targets were destroyed. 1 additional enemy aircraft was destroyed. So we got 4 kills, but for a loss of 2 MiG-21s in return. Unfortunately, for a total rating of failure score of 0. Which seems a little harsh. If we had shot down 1 more aircraft, that would have been 50% of the primary flight, and then I think that would have been a success, but... So, here in the stats, Win Van Koch fired all 30 rounds from the 30mm cannon, and both ATOLs for 1 hit and no kills. Oh shit! What the hell? Did I not see that A4 explode in front of me? I guess it must not have. He must have, it must have knocked pieces off of him, and he must have pulled away. But it's showing that I didn't get a kill. Oh, interesting. I could have sworn I did. Well, Second Lieutenant Tran fired all of his ammo and both missiles as well for no hits. Number 3, Second Lieutenant Wynn. Now, he did quite well. He fired all of his ammo. He got a kill with guns, and he got another kill with an ATOL. So our first air-to-air missile kill goes to Second Lieutenant Wynn. And then Second Lieutenant Dang in number 4. He fired guns. He fired guns and got 2 kills with 30 rounds of ammunition. So that's pretty impressive. He's the one who ended up not firing his missiles, so I was mistaken. That was 4 that we saw dogfighting. So he didn't fire his missiles, but he got 2 air-to-air kills with just the guns, including that A6, I think. Well, the A6 is what I sent him after, so we'll see if that's what he actually got. But, so interesting. So 4 kills going to the wingmen, and the 1 kill that I thought I got, I apparently did not. Curious. How about those AA2s, huh? Had solid tone in level flight with both of them, and neither one tracked. Oh, bad news over in the roster. Second Lieutenant Win Hoi Kim, our number 3, he got 2 kills in 1 mission to become an ace right out of the gate. First mission. Unfortunately, he was also shot down and killed. He's our first KIA of the squadron after achieving that ace status. So at 12:36 and 10 seconds, we began our attack on the A4 squadron. I fired 2 AA2s within 2 seconds of each other. Neither one tracked. And then I fired 5 rounds on that gun attack that I was not situated for well at all and missed. Just a few seconds later, Chow fired 6 rounds and Kiem fired 15, hitting and destroying the first A4. So the first air-to-air kill was actually made with guns. And then down here at 12:37:51, Win Van Koch hit an A4 Skyhawk with the 30mm cannon, not destroying it. So I thought it was going down, and I was wrong. Must have kept flying and either made it back out to sea, or maybe one of the other wingmen finished him off. I don't really know. 12:38:07 came the next kill. Chew destroyed the A4 after hitting it with guns. Oh, yep, and then at 12:42, Chew destroyed an A6 Intruder, also with guns. So those were his 2 gun kills. He got an A4 and an A6. The A6s weren't even our target. They just happened to be passing through the middle of the battle. And I sent him after him. So, pretty cool he got that kill. At 12:42, I had a Sparrow fired at me, which I never saw. Luckily, MiG-21s had radar warning receivers installed quite early, because I would not have detected that missile launch otherwise. And then at 12:43, Chow was hit by 20mm cannon from an F8 Crusader, shot down near the Hadong barracks. Just moments later, another F8 fired at Kiem, hitting him and shooting him down near Bakyang POL storage. So, interesting to note, both of my pilots were hit by cannon fire. One was able to eject and survived. The other one was killed either on impact or possibly by the rounds themselves. Hard to tell. But we had a 50-50 split today on pilots surviving gun attacks. Okay. That is it for today. Like I said, sort of a mixed bag mission. The AI definitely having a better day out than I did with the new airplane. But that's okay. I'll get more used to it as we go. And, part of it was definitely just bad luck, plagued by those shitty missiles. American Sidewinders had only a, whatever it was, something like an 18% success rate, so they barely worked at all. And now this is a Soviet reverse engineered copy, so you probably cut that in half. So we're probably looking at like a 9% functionality rate. So maybe we'll see better performance next time out of them. Other than that, we got to get used to the airplane so my gunnery skills improve. So next time out, we're going to try to do better. We'll see you then.